evening, everyone. I think we'll get started. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Happy Veterans Day. I'm David Siders, and I'm the Civic Engagement Coordinator with the Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Library. On behalf of everyone here at the library and our guests this evening, I want to welcome you to this special event on this Veterans Day. We're so excited to be partnering with Easterseals and Talbert House for tonight's discussion on the modern day veteran and resources available to them with hosts of the Panjwai Podcast, Curtis and Luke. We will get the perspective of the modern day veteran from the hosts of the podcast themselves and the stories they have gathered throughout their work interviewing veterans from the Panjwai district in Afghanistan. We will also dig into how we can support and honor our modern day veteran with the wonderful resources our local organizations have available. Your public library has an abundance of resources available to veterans, from career assistance and resume building. And if we don't have what you're looking for, we will be able to connect you with some of our many local partners who will be able to help. We are recording this event this evening to further connect people to the resources and expertise shared tonight. So if you're a guest, please turn off your camera if that is more comfortable for you. We will have a short Q&A at the end of the conversation this evening and encourage you to type your questions into the chat along the way, which will be moderated throughout by our special events coordinator, Laura Madden, who will select questions for discussion at the end. Special thanks to Laura for developing our event this evening. So without further ado, I'm so happy to introduce our guest tonight. I'll start with Kimberly Thomas with the Talbert House. Kimberly, can you give us everyone a quick summary of Talbert House, your role, and a brief rundown on the veteran-specific resources it offers?
Yes, I'm Kimberly Thomas. I am the Veterans Recruiter at Talbert House in Cincinnati, Ohio. Let me give you a background on Talbert House. Our mission is empowering children, adults, families to live healthy, safe, and productive lives. We have 5 service lines. We have addiction, our community care, courts and corrections, housing, and mental health. The part I fall under is the community care, our SSVF program. Our SSVF program is for veterans and families. So what I do, I help veterans who's in the process, they may be homeless or prevent them being homelessness. I help them find jobs, either better paying jobs or ones that's unemployed. So what I do, I help them build their resume. We do mock interviews and we get them hired at the Talbert House. Talbert House is our first agency we work with. We currently have over 20 veterans working with us. About 7 of those veterans have came through our program. It's a new program that started top of the year and is helping our local veterans find employment. Also, Talbert House we currently serve over 27,000 clients and with different provincial services throughout the Southwest of Ohio. And that's Talbert House.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. We'll hear more from Kimberly and her services with Talbert House in a bit. Now I'll hand the mic over to Scott Robertson, who is the Director of Veterans and Military Affairs with the Greater Cincinnati Easterseals. Scott, could you share a little more about yourself, Easterseals, and the work you do for veterans? And after that,
Absolutely.
I'll our podcast. So, thank you.
Thank you, David. Sorry, everyone. I'm having a little unstable connection here, so if I pop out, you'll let me know. But as I said, I was the Director of Easterseals Military and Veteran Services. Myself, I'm an Air Force vet. I was blessed to serve 30 years active duty for this great country. Came in 1981, retired in 2011. I've been the Director of Easterseals Military and Veteran Services since 2018. What's unique is Easterseals have been around for 100 years. And each Easterseals throughout the nation, their 71 affiliates, designs themselves on the community they serve. Here in Cincinnati in 2012, they decided there was a need to serve veterans in this community. So they spun up a veterans program here. So a lot of people ask me, I didn't know Easterseals serve veterans, and they don't globally, but each affiliate can, and we do. So we've been staffed since 2012. There are 5 of us. All of us are have active duty experience and military deployments. And over the years that we've been here, we've served over 3,500 veterans. We focus on employment mainly, but to do that, we understand that the veterans we serve have many barriers to that employment. So we help them overcome those barriers, provide the resources to get them to be able to sustain meaningful employment. We primarily serve homeless veterans, veterans dealing with addiction coming out of incarceration, but we also serve veterans who are just transitioning from the military back to civilian community or coming to the Cincinnati area for the first time. So we all of our resources are available to anyone at no cost, and we serve all veterans no matter the category of their military discharge. So we're very proud of that fact, and we're here for all veterans all the time. So that's what we do. And before I go further with my story, I want to introduce really our two main guests here, Luke and Curtis, who are the hosts of the Panjwai Podcast. And I'll start with Curtis. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. And I just want to start out by saying it's a privilege to be here. My name is Curtis Grace. I am a former Chief Warrant Officer too in the United States Army. I served the first 2 years of my military career as an infantryman, deployed once to Afghanistan in 2012. Then I went over, I became an Apache helicopter pilot and deployed to Afghanistan again in 2017. Exited the military in 2019, and I'm currently a full-time MBA student at Indiana University Kelley.
Great. Luke?
Yes, my name is Luke Coffey, and I'm a 4.5-year veteran in the United States Army. I went in as an infantryman and came out as an infantryman. Deployed twice. I deployed to Iraq in 2009, and then I deployed to Afghanistan in 2012. And then I got out and went back to school, and I've more or less been in school ever since. And so this past year is the first time that I've been out, and out of school, that is. And so I'm picking up the baton and working, and while my wife is pursuing her PhD at University of Tennessee.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this time we're just going to go into some thoughts. You know, one of the big things that we've all experienced is, well, the two aspects of it, really. It's a transition. And for the three of us, Curtis, Luke, and myself, we were deployed, and then there was a transition back to the world, if you will, back out of the sandbox and back into society, if you will, the military society. And then after we left the military, there was that transition from the military, which was an identity that we had for the time we were in there, back to the civilian sector to re-identify ourselves, redefine ourselves, rebrand ourselves. And those are significant challenges that veterans face every day. And I would like each of us to talk about the challenges we faced as we made those transitions. One, from deployment back to, your rear base, and then from the military out. So either one of you, please step in and talk about it.
Yeah, I'll start us off. So yeah, I think transition is an emerging narrative around veterans right now, because it's such a prevalent part of the veterans out of the back end of this conflict and the back end of the last 20 years of going to war, deploying multiple times over the course of a career. So that transition is something that's becoming more and more prevalent within the community. Personally, transitioning out initially was very easy for me because I was so eager to get out, and I was so goal driven and had that focus of going back to school, doing well at school. And so I was able to achieve those goals for a while. To be perfectly honest, it wasn't until fairly recently, in the past year and a half or so, that I think I began my transition into the civilian world, that I've had to go back to work, and I've not been in school. And, it's been interesting to try and navigate that space a little bit more successfully without the framework and the structure of school there to apply myself to. So the short answer is still trying to figure some things out, I think, but it's been 9 years down the road. But the long answer is there's a way to transition out successfully, and I think it begins with having like a really clear, determined set of goals before you ever exit the service.
100%. Curtis?
Yeah, I mean, with the first question, just regarding coming from combat and coming back, even just to the stateside mission and remaining on active duty, there's a lot that goes into that, and a lot of it is a mindset shift. Anybody who's deployed, they understand, when you're downrange, it's very much business, like you're doing your job. You don't have to worry about anything else. You go out, and whatever your job is, that is what you do day in, day in, day. And that's why a lot of people prefer to be deployed, because they're actually getting to do what they've spent their entire career training to do. Then you come back and suddenly the priority is catching up on training or doing supply inspections or whatever. And people struggle with that because they had this sense of purpose, 6 months prior, where they were, doing what they trained to do, what they enjoyed to do, what they signed up to do. And then to take that away from them so drastically, that's something that I think the military has failed with over time and time. But it's also something that, individual service members have trouble reckoning with themselves. I mean, even on their 4th or 5th deployment, they struggle with it. So that's one thing that stands out to me as far as the transition from combat to come back, is to have to adapt to being a generalist again, instead of being a specialist in your career or whatever. As far as getting out of the military, I have to echo Luke. It was fairly easy for me. I left, the military on a Thursday, and I came back on a Tuesday and started my full-time job at Amazon. But that was because I had a plan. I knew that I was getting out. I started, down that road months prior. I was extremely motivated. I knew what I wanted to do at the time. I don't work there anymore, so obviously it wasn't a long-term plan. But I also echo, when it got to the point, it's like, what do I really want to do? Because this isn't what I want to do. That's when I started to go down that road. It's like, okay, what do I have as far as transferable skills? What do I enjoy doing? And that's when some of those challenges really came into play. And, I selected an MBA partially because it is kind of generalist, and you can kind of pick your paths from that. And there's a lot of opportunities that come off of that. I've just observed a lot of veterans, they come out, they have no plan. The only thing that they can see is, getting out, that is their next step. They don't see past getting out of the military, and then they get out and, they enjoy their month or so of terminal leave. And then that's kind of when they start to run into issues.
It's very true. And, my transition, like I said, at 30 years, I knew at 30 years and like 2 days, I was out. Nobody was keeping me in. So I had the clock ticking, and I knew that was approaching. But I saw a lot of my friends who would just transition into like a government job. They'd take the GS job, and I refused. I said, I've done 30 years. I love this. I want to do something different. And I was a professional photographer, so I started that business. But then we moved from San Antonio, Texas up here to Cincinnati. When we moved up here, I didn't want to start the business again. And so I actually had to look in earnest for a job. And the first thing I did, consolidate 30 years into a resume, which ended up being about an 18-page resume without the graphics and the charts. And, and people are like, burn that, can you get that down to 1 page? I'm like, but the school I went to in 1981 is very important, And so it took me a long time to break the paradigm of everything I did is important. And because I don't know how to translate it to the civilian verbiage, if you will, I struggled for about 6 months just to get it down to 1 page to say, this is really my identity. This is what I've done. These are my transferable skills. And I talked to many people who've transitioned after myself, and they said the same thing, like you were saying, Curtis. They had kind of a plan. I'm just going to get out. I've got some skills. I'll be okay. But it's not as easy as that. And then when you do step out, you realize your worth and your value. And then it's a challenge of those around you don't recognize it because you can't communicate it effectively to them. And you feel lost, and you feel abandoned at the time, not really by society, but you just don't know where to turn and to talk to anybody. And if you're not in a military community itself, like I was in San Antonio with, bases all around, military all around, you don't have really anybody to talk to share those experiences with, unless you can connect to veterans. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add real quick, the military tries right now to do that whole like translate your military skills, but it's abysmal. It is awful. They give like really, really poor advice on how to construct a resume, how to construct your LinkedIn. Like if you see, people that are like, yeah, being a company commander was the same as being a CEO. Like, no, it was not. But that's the kind of advice that's given out. So there's a lot of misinformation that comes from the military. So you can't rely on that transition process to prepare you. It's not going to.
Is very true. And what I love right now is I see as on LinkedIn and through Salesforce and many other entities, they are now focusing on taking the veteran, teaching them these skills, these soft skills, And there's such a community out there of veterans who have gone before you to say, hey, this is the path, this is the way ahead, these are the skills, these are the tasks, these are the jobs, that you need to do right now to make yourself effective, marketable, and people are looking for you. But you have to do these things, because if you don't help yourself, nobody else will. And then that's where we all come in that are on this call right now is, again, the library provides resume writing skill sets, translating those skills into something meaningful. We do interview skills and things like that, so that a veteran who hasn't been in the workforce file can go through these mock interviews to be able to know what it is to sit in front of a panel of people and be grilled and know how to answer that.
And I agree with you on that, Scott, because that's what we offer as well at the Talbert House, mock interviews, because I noticed when I know a lot of veterans who just got out, they didn't have that skill. Had to, they used to have maybe one person in the interview room. So I had to prepare them where there's two people doing an interview now. And so at the Talbert House, we were thinking about, because you all have mentioned that the resources when they first get out, is there something we could build that maybe Talbert House or other agencies could come together where we could have a one resource, one stop for our local veterans when they do come back home, when they are deployed, when they don't have a plan, for the unplanned veteran who's out, but they don't have a plan. Can we establish a one source shop for them? Is that something that we could possibly build for them so they can have that connection?
And Kimberly, you nailed it. So Curtis and Lucas, you talked individually, and again, your transition experience, would something like that in a community collaboration for veterans coming to that community? Because Luke, you're in Tennessee, right? Is that what you said? Right. Are you near a military installation?
I think the nearest one probably Fort Campbell, which would be
okay. So
3 or 4 hours west.
Yeah, 3 or 4 hours away. So really, their influence is marginal at best to your community. So as you came to that area in Tennessee, wouldn't it be nice if that community could vector you to, hey, this is the community of resources for veterans to help you, know where to go and who to talk to, and veteran-friendly employers, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we appreciate about what you guys are doing here, and using something like a public service like the library is, that's a space that's local, so you're aware of what the local veterans need. As soon as you expand beyond the local community, then you're going to have a breakdown of communication of the actual needs of the individuals. Because what a veteran needs in San Francisco versus what a veteran needs in Cincinnati are going to be two completely different worlds of needs. One guy might need housing, and one guy might need a place that's warm to sleep. Or one guy might need something, that is completely unrelated to someone in this space because of whatever other, demands are being made of them as they try to get a job in tech versus getting a job and at the local library. So, right. But yeah, keeping it centered on the community, I think is the next step in terms of setting veterans up for success. Because if it doesn't start with the local community, just like pretty much every other aspect of our society, then it's not going to work in the long run. So it's definitely admirable to start small and start local, because that way that framework is inherent in place and waiting for people to step into it.
Very true. And you know what, I get to toot my own horn for a second, but one thing we're very excited about at Easterseals is just recently we purchased the YMCA behind our building. We're actually converting part of that into a veteran center. So it'll be the first brick and mortar veteran center in Cincinnati that we hoping to open our doors to other social services to come in, like Social Security office to be able to come in on Tuesdays and provide services. The VA maybe have a benefits counselor there, the library to come in, provide services, whatever. But it's not going to be just us serving our veterans, but we want a place for people to come and with conference rooms and all that kind of stuff. But we see that as a collaboration, like Kimberly was talking about, with Talbert House and the resources they have. So if we had a group of veterans, one-stop shop, they come here, she comes over and does the interviewing process, training and things of that nature. So we see that as the way ahead. And along with that, we're also trying to work with some kind of sponsorship program. So someone transitioning to the community, we want to identify some sponsors that can greet you and your wife, Luke, as you come to this community, because you're not familiar with it. You don't know where where the schools are that you'd favor, or, the communities you want to live in, or the centers of gravity for veterans and their families. And we want to be able to share that to people as they transition, so that they have that sense of community and they already understand how important veterans are to this community. And we're trying to, replicate that to all the Easterseals throughout the country. So, we're really trying to impact how society greets veterans as they transition from place to place. All right, Kimberly, you got any questions?
Do. So, because I like how you mentioned about you all going to do the YMCA. That would be a great idea. That's why I like that. But my question is, what resources, like I'm not a veteran, so me working in the veteran community is brand new to me. Like I said, I started this position at the top of the year, but I always was curious. And when veterans, when I would speak with them, they say they would come home, but they didn't have health resources. Like, some of my population now, veterans, they say they're looking for health resources. They some say they can't get the VA benefits because they were discharged, and I found that interesting. I didn't know that. So I always curious, like, how can we mentioned the resources. What about the ones that need housing, education, say how they could get prepared for that. If like for housing, like we offer housing, but the waiting list is so long. So is there other resources? Is that a big thing? A lot of veterans are running into housing and in education. Like I said, I'm from a civilian side, I'm learning a lot about this. So do you all see a lot of veterans with that barrier? Is that a huge barrier when they come home with housing? Are they going to family, or do they have a place to go to when they are released from when they are deployed? Not deployed, but when they're no longer in the service.
So I'd say most have a place to go. I can think of very, very, very few instances that I'm personally aware of. So that's obviously not an all-encompassing scope. So it's by no means definitive, but I know very little instances where a soldier got out and had nowhere to go. And I can tell you right now, if they were one of my soldiers or if they were a friend of mine, they would have had a place to go because they would have had my couch. But I think as the further that veterans get away from their discharge date is as issues like that come up more. Because most soldiers, they get out, they have a little bit of money stacked up, they're going to get paid for another 30 days while they're on leave. They're going to go, most of them are still in their early 20s, so they go to their parents, or they stay at a buddy's house or something like that. So in the short term, I don't think it's as big of a deal. Again, that's not a definitive answer. But I think the longer that they get away from that discharge date is when they start to run into more issues. And as far as housing and education and things go like that, a lot of people aren't going to like this answer, but the number one resource is the VA. They are the definitive resource as far as, VA home loans or GI Bill benefits or Montgomery GI Bill benefits or vocational rehab and stuff like that. As far as healthcare goes, again, for most veterans, that is going to be the VA. However, there were some recent rule changes with the VA. So in the past, the VA couldn't help you, you're on a waiting list, right? You heard all the horror stories. I've been waiting 4 months to get into an appointment. That's not the case anymore. Now, if they can't see you in a suitable amount of time, they're required to provide the funds for you to see somebody in the private sector. That's a fairly recent rule change. So hopefully we can let more veterans know that, the VA is not perfect. I don't work for the VA. I don't represent them. I got lots of issues with them myself, but it is getting better.
Yeah, I think, the second half of that is a lot of veterans just frankly don't know what the VA has to offer as well, like the extensiveness of what's there to support them. So, the military, we're not going to dog out the military, but basically another thing it does is when you do step away from it, it's got too much going on to give you a stack of stuff saying, here's what the VA has going on. It's on the individual to find that out. And it's kind of a trial and error process. if there would be a way to alleviate that trial and error and make clear to the individual veteran what is there within the structure of the VA that they need for their specific needs, because some folks don't want to go back to school. Some folks, some folks don't have the determination or the desire to even go back to college, like the traditional idea of a 4-year college. But what is there are programs to get people into the basic level of what you need for your particular field. That isn't the GI Bill. It's called vocational rehab and education, and it's a completely different program that I didn't even know about until I was 4 years into my GI Bill, and I needed to get through the rest of my education. So there's programs there that we could definitely do a better job as a community of highlighting for people, so that when they do make that transition, they know what they can lean on, essentially.
Right.
I wanted to chime in and add my experience in working with the library, and I've worked with the VA over the years. And Luke, that's a very interesting concept, the experience of trial and error, and to kind of connect with Kimberly's thoughts and question about folks don't know that they may be eligible. And I think that fits with the trial and error. And I think Scott has illuminated us with the idea of a physical community space that's very welcoming, that can bring people in to understand and learn that, yes, they are eligible. So it's the eligibility issue, but also eliminating the trial and error feeling. I have a friend that's a veteran too, and he spent years not knowing what kind of services he could connect with. And we talk about that often. So maybe to add to the question that just came into the chat, of folks that may not have family or friends to rely on, or experiencing disabilities or challenges such as PSTD that makes it hard to get employment and even housing for that matter. Can we kind of speak on, and Scott touched on it with the idea of the community center, but ways we can better connect and eliminate that trial and error process?
Yeah, I'm going to thank you, David, very much for that. So, one thing we do, as I mentioned on my intro, we here at Easterseals, we focus a lot on the homeless veteran and those dealing with poverty issues and all sorts of challenges, if you will. And what's interesting is when I got in this job and we started to investigate what is a homeless veteran, is not necessarily just the individual who lives under a bridge, but it is the guy who maybe, or girl who's couch surfing at a friend's house, or somebody's living with a girlfriend and their name isn't on the lease. They could truly be told to leave on a moment's notice, and they're without, shelter of some sort, which is very interesting and very challenging. And it's amazing the number of veterans that my team helps on a routine basis that actually live in cars. We had a gentleman, he lived in a van with his 2 teenage sons for a year and a half. And all of a sudden the van broke down. So he had to turn the van in to get it fixed. So he was without his house for a period of time. And luckily somebody said, you need to reach out to Easterseals, and we were able to get him into a shelter and actually got him into, transitional living, got him a job and changed his life, plus got his car fixed, et cetera, et cetera. But, it was crazy, the issues that he was dealing with, but he didn't seek out any resources or any help. He was good with what he was doing. He was just, living day by day and supporting his family the best he could. And, as we go forward with talking about the benefits that people are entitled to, both these gentlemen talked on it already. There are so many veterans that when they come in our office, the first thing we do is we get them on the computer to log in to see if they're eligible for any VA benefits, and half these people have never even attempted to register to see if they could register, because as all of us know, we got in the military between the ages of 18 and 21. And if we got out before the age of 30, the VA was for old people. It was for those Vietnam guys. I don't need the VA. I'm healthy. Yeah, I may have a bum knee because I fell off, a Humvee or something, like being stupid, but I don't need the VA services. That's for those guys. And when they are finally down and out and they're looking for help, we say the VA is there for you. If you qualify for these services, you're entitled to these services, you're entitled to these benefits, and it can change your life. And they're so thankful because of those resources. But, for us in this community right here in Cincinnati, if you're not sure, definitely you can connect with the VA itself. You can go on my VA benefits and look for that, or you can contact us at Easterseals and we'll be help walk you through that to find out if you are eligible. And then if you're not, we have the resources to provide to you those resources that can help you if you're not entitled to benefits. So we have other community supporters in this region that want to help veterans if they aren't entitled to the medical care, if they aren't entitled to legal care. We have those connections, and I know Kimberly has some of those too. So here we care about the veterans and what they need, and we want to help them, and that's the power of this meeting right now. Is the fact that we can share these resources and our experiences.
And at the Talbert House, as I mentioned, we have our SSVF program where we help veterans that come in. We have case managers that help with housing. We have a case manager that's currently helping veterans get their disability. The case manager, he just helped a guy get 50,000 back and back disability. So we have a lot of resources. And then we also have our fatherhood program. Like we have veterans they start with us in the SSVF, but we may see they have another need with like fatherhood, and they transfer to our fatherhood program as well. And then we have case managers, like I mentioned, we have case managers that help with my role, I help them with employment, but we have case managers that help them with if they experience PTSD, and we have our mental health section as well. So once a veteran comes into our program underneath our SSVF program, we have so much other resources we could connect them to in our line of services. So they may come in and say, well, I need housing, but as they break down more what they need, they say, okay, well, I need my mental health addressed. I'm suffering from PTSD. Then we move them to our mental health line as well. And then we just started a new program that's starting actually this month. That is once a veteran has been placed in housing, we will follow them up to 2 years to make sure that they're able to keep their housing. If they need a better paying job or more income, we're helping them so they can say, we're going to cover a portion, 35% of your rent for 2 years to help you build and get back to it being established, and help you remove those other barriers. Then we at Talbert, we offer similar things as Easterseals as well. So there's a lot of resources, but my thing is like a lot of them don't know how to get the resources. I had a client, he was homeless, and so we placed him in the housing, but he didn't feel comfortable in that apartment. So we had to move him around to several apartments. Then we get some clients that call the CAP line, and they refer them to us as well. So it's just getting the information out there so they know how to contact different agencies, and how they may be a client with Easterseals, but they also could be a client at Talbert House as well, or different other agencies within the community.
Yeah, wonderful, thank you. And going back to all these things that we're talking about, being stable and utilizing resources in our community and knowing what's out there. I go back to our hosts. The library is always, an amazing resource for all of this, because all of us, I know when, I sent my flyers to David and Laura to make sure that they can post them in the library, because again, how do we get that word out? How we can help our veterans in our community or in any community is we have to find a central repository of that information, and no better place than the library with that. And speaking of structure and everything else like that, I want to go back to Curtis and Luke for a second and just talk about, we were talking about transitioning earlier. And one thing I know that was a big challenge to me when I moved, as I said, from San Antonio up here, was recreating structure again. How important, both of you gentlemen pursued education. Was that how you created structure in your life after you left the military?
Well, personally, I think for me, I inadvertently did it because I wasn't seeking structure, because I had my fill of structure. But I think the lesson learned there was like I needed enough structure exterior to myself to apply myself to. Fortunately for me, school was a great framework for that, because it's really not that much. Like it's just enough for you to tack onto, but it's not so much that it requires you to really delve down and think, okay, I need to build this back into my life. So I think really the answer to that is kind of individual cases vary in a lot of ways. It's kind of hard for me, because who am I to say, but I think for me, it's hard to have like the one all be all in terms of structure, because everybody's structure is going to be built differently, and the things that they need are going to be built differently. So, the way I built it in was just school. I could focus on school in that short term, 3 months, get the course done, move on to the next thing. And so some people need a longer vision. Some people need that 10, 15-year plan. So, I think it's individual differences vary. The problem is trying to get people to identify how much and what exactly that structure is and how much of that they need in their lives.
Yeah, and I think Luke kind of ironed in on something pretty critical there, because I'm kind of the same way. I intentionally avoided the type of structure that the military provided, not because it wasn't good, but it didn't necessarily work for me. I had to find my own system of structure. And I think that's one thing that a lot of guys and gals that get out of the military have an issue with, is that they feel like they have to replicate that structure. I have to get up at 6 a.m. I have to do this. I have to eat at the same time every day. You don't have to do that, but you just need to make sure you do it at some point. There's a great speech by Admiral McRaven where he says, if you want to be successful, just make sure you make your bed. Then you've at least accomplished one thing a day. He doesn't say you have to make your bed at 5 o'clock in the morning. He just says make your bed. So I think structure, as Luke said, it can mean different things to a lot of different people, but you have to have something that keeps you going. Because in the military, there's always a goal, right? We're training towards this objective. We're working towards this mission. We are, getting proficient on this weapon system, whatever. If you don't have goals, like, the goals should drive your structure. So for Luke, it was school. I want to pursue these degrees. I want to achieve these academic objectives. For some people, it's starting a business. I want to start a business. I want to be self-reliant. I want to go, or I want to work in tech, or I want to, whatever your goal is, as long as you have a goal and you're identifying the steps to get you to the goal, that is a structure in and of itself. So for me personally, I know a lot about myself, and I know that if I do nothing, then that's not healthy for me. So I'm always doing random things like creating a podcast, and inadvertently creating structure there and a goal. So I think the short answer of my rambling there is I think it varies.
Yeah, and I think hearing about Scott's good question about structure, then hearing from Kimberly and Scott's expertise about resources that help eliminate barriers and help build that navigation. And what Luke and Curtis are talking about is all about ways to develop a sense of belonging for people. That's a very important goal in our libraries, is to welcome all people and give them that structure, give them those resources, give them personalized attention, frankly, compassion and caring, which leads to a sense of belonging. And that goes back to a sense of community. So I think on that note, how about we pivot, because we're running fairly short on time, to kind of the sense of belonging that the Panjwai Podcast brings, a sense of a resource that people can tune into the podcast across the country and beyond, to find a place and to find a sense of togetherness for discussion. So Luke and Curtis, thank you to Scott and Kimberly for sharing, but Luke and Curtis, can you kind of just go into what the Panjwai Podcast is all about?
Sure. So the origins lie in a kind of maybe naive ambition to write a book about the experience, because on the back end, especially as years went by from between now and that 2012 deployment to Afghanistan, we began to realize it was kind of indicative of the just infantry experience at war. And so, that was the origin of the idea. And then it kind of evolved into, well, we should interview other people, because we realized that our perspective and what we could bring to the table was limited. We didn't have the guy who was 15 feet down that way. We didn't have his perspective on the story that made it completely different. So we decided that we would interview folks. And so we decided we interview the guys that we were there with. And then we decided to turn that into a podcast. And so as part of that process, we've kind of just exploded into this really strong veterans of Panjwai district specifically. And so we've extended it beyond just our immediate circle and to people who are there from every period, from every army. The Canadian Army held Panjwai for 5 or 6 years, which is why most Americans have never heard of that part of Kandahar. British and different people within the different armies and different jobs. Everything from the young lieutenant making the supply runs to the battalion commander. So we've able to create a kind of encompassing, well, not really encompassing, but a good feel for what it was like, the experience of that particular place in Afghanistan was like. So that's the core focus. It's become the core focus of the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, he captured it pretty well. I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
Well, we encourage everyone to take a look at the website for the Panjwai Podcast. It gives some really vital background and so on. But can you kind of tell us how you structure each podcast, how you decide on themes, how you decide on what people want to hear and why they want to tune in?
So we are very, I don't want to say picky, but we're very selective about the type of guest that comes on, just in the sense that, everybody has a story to tell, but not everyone is a great entertainer. And we're not looking to wow anybody or anything, but some people they have difficulty speaking, or they don't know how to emphasize what they've experienced. So we started very small with people that we already knew, and then we started to invite them onto the show. And one thing we picked up, I'm not sure where I got the idea from, I know it's not my idea, but was to do what we call pre-interviews. So before we actually record the actual podcast interview, we get these guests and we bring them on, and we do it offline. We don't record it, and we just talk. If it's people that we know, we basically just spend a couple hours catching up. If it's people we don't know, we spend a couple hours getting to know them. We get an idea of what their experience was like, the kind of questions and stories we want to talk about, how we want to structure and format the interview, so that when we actually do the recorded interview, we have an outline, we know exactly what we want to talk about, we have ways that we can segue into other topics, and it makes what could normally be a very intimidating experience for the guest much less so, because they already know what we're going to talk about. We already know what we're going to talk about. We just got to get them to the finish line. So that's a big part of the process right there, is that pre-interview being absolutely critical to the success of the actual episode.
And what are some examples of particular topics?
Oh man, I mean, the topics are very small in terms of of their scope. We, other than the fact we may have a couple senior leaders on this season, generally you're talking like the infantryman, the private, the E4, maybe a helicopter pilot. It might be the broadest scope that we've had so far. Their individual experience. What was it like to be there? What were you feeling? What were your emotions? What was your reaction to seeing these things? How has it affected you today? How does it affect you in your day-to-day life? What does it mean to you to have gone through that experience? And how does that experience stack up against, maybe previous deployments or subsequent deployments? So it's very much a very personal narrative of their experience in Panjwai.
I'll jump in and kind of wrap up with some additional questions that I've gotten or have heard over the past week or so as I've been planning this. Something that I wanted to ask you guys too is in regards to your interviewees and the stories you've heard in relation to kind of our topic of the evening, the resources for veterans kind of central theme we're going with. Is there any stories that you've heard that have particularly stuck with you about either their transition out of the military, or a particular story about support or resources that they've had? And it could also be a personal story. Don't let me hold you back.
I think the biggest thing that's really that I think we need to take time to highlight is that the vast majority of veterans are very successful when they get out. So there's been a lot of success stories. A lot of guys have, despite the experiences that they had and the burdens they carry forward, be it physical wounds, PTSD, emotional wounds, they still are able to carve a very successful path. They're able to find those structures that Scott had talked about. They're able to apply themselves to their goals. So the majority of the guys that we've interviewed and the gals have been success stories, to be fair. As far as like personal ones, there's, I think most recently to hone in what we were talking about earlier about and not knowing what's at the VA and what's there for you. One of the guys that we've had come on the podcast, who's a good buddy of ours, he never even showed up, darkened the door at the VA. And this is someone who needs some support. He needed some structure, and he needed some help to kind of get him to a particular kind of focus in his life. And he balked up about going to the VA for years, and we pushed him, and we pushed him, and we pushed him, and he finally went, and he went through the process, and he's getting help for alcohol addiction. He's getting help for PTSD, which he has pretty severe PTSD, and he's getting financial help, and that he's finally getting compensated for the wounds of war, but also they botched a surgery that he had that's causing him long-term problems. And so he's getting disability for that now, and that's helping him finish school and pursue those goals. So that's been a good story for him to, like you guys were saying earlier, it's not the old fogies, it's not the Vietnam era guys, the new generation of veterans that's coming out of this most recent conflict. We are now transitioning into veterans of a historical conflict, and it's time to get over the hubris of youth, or whatever it is that prevents us from going to the VA and going down there and seeking that support. And that's a story from our podcast. Someone who I hope that through talking with us on the podcast actually began to pull those threads and pursue those things.
And that's
great.
So it's an interesting case there as well, because there was a moment where that individual was in a very, very dark place. And he made a comment to me when I was on the phone with him. He was very, very drunk, and he said, my life has been a disaster since I came on the podcast. And it just like sunk my heart out. Like I sat and I cried for hours. Like, we have to cancel this thing. Like we can't keep doing this. And it was Luke that was like, hey man, A, he's super drunk. He didn't mean it like that. And B, 1 out of 100, if we've helped 99 people and one of them is struggling, we can help him still. But this is still a valid effort. And as it turns out, that's the same guy. He finally went and got help, and he's seeking treatment, and he got all his benefits, and now he's 100% disabled, and he finally is being taken care of. And he would now say that he wouldn't have done it if he hadn't come on the podcast. So that's an interesting example of how the roller coaster of emotions that we go through. And one final just anecdote from the podcast was we had an individual who, in one of our early episodes, who talked to us very candidly about the fact that he considered killing himself right before he got out of the military. To the point he said if he could have found a bullet, he would have done it. And it, that was quite the journey for him, and he is still deeply impacted by his experiences. But he's also, as Luke said, he's very successful. He has a wife and a family that loves him. He's found success in the civilian sector. So this is somebody that came back from the brink. He sought the help, and he's doing great. So I want people to understand that the resources are there, and if you just take the step to ask, there's, as evidenced here with Kimberly and Scott, Laura and David, and all the other resources that are out there. There are so many people that will drop whatever they're doing and help you however they can. You just have to ask.
I think that's a great place to end. Curtis, you smoothed us on out of there. I couldn't ask for a better epilogue.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Luke and Curtis, for really sharing the power and the effectiveness of the Panjwai Podcast. Kimberly and Scott for all of the resources. But we feel it's really important to ask at least one final question as we're winding down the event tonight. And that is, how do we honor veterans of the wars past and wars present? You both, Luke and Scott, kind of touched on this, but what do you think is the difference in how we honor and support our modern day veterans?
Well, I've talked a lot, but I'm going to peek up again. I'll start with the historical aspect. Even today is a great example. We as Americans in 2021 see it as Veterans Day, but it's not. It's Armistice Day. This is the 11th day of the 11th hour of the 11th year. This is the end of World War I. So recognizing the historical importance. As I said, the veterans from this most recent conflict become historical veterans. There's ways of honoring in remembrance and respect. Respect and remembrance shouldn't be confused with hero worship, but we can remember and respect and admire and see the best in what has come beforehand. And I think if we how to honor the modern day veteran, honestly, just what you guys are doing here, just like little things that are shouting out into the world. This is here for your support, so that the next generation of veterans is seen as a successful generation, is definitely a way to honor the modern veteran, is to set that modern veteran of success for in modern life. So that's my 2 cents.
And kind of play off of that, one thing that we can do to honor the modern veteran is to understand that, yes, they are a veteran, but that isn't their entire, identity. They are family members, they are fathers, they are husbands, they are co-workers, they are deacons at the church, they are volunteers in the Boy Scout troop. There's so many more aspects of their life than that very narrow piece of time that they, or in some cases like Scott, 30 years, so it's not quite as narrow there, but this piece of time that they spent in the military, it doesn't completely define them. It's a very foundational experience, especially those that went to combat and deployed, and that's an experience that really sits with you. But it doesn't define you. I don't care if you've done it for 30 years, if you've done it for 4, you have other things going on in your life, and it's unfair to just plaster a stereotype or labels like, well, that's a veteran, so he's got PTSD and he's crazy, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and clears his house, or whatever. You see it in Hollywood, you see it in TV shows, you see it in the media. There's this rush to say all veterans are broken, and they, we just there's something wrong with all of them. No, I mean, treat them like human beings. Thanks for your service. We appreciate what you did, and hey, man, good job at the company softball game. Those can be in the same sentence, and I don't think that that's degrading of their service. And also it avoids the inevitable hero worship, but also understanding that sometimes there are special needs for those that have gone out and served our country and experienced these traumatic events. We need to be in place to help them.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
And I want to just chime in. Our Guard and Reserve. They are also, anyone that raises their right hand to serve and defend this country. We want to serve them and honor them and what they do and recognize their service. But Curtis, you nailed it. My service doesn't define who I am. I don't wear it like armor as I go out. I am me, and it is a chapter in my life. Well, it's actually 30 chapters in my life. But every one of us had an experience of some kind. Like I said, if you just went through basic training and then you separated, or if you did a full, 30 years like myself, whatever, we all have common cores of experience, and we can be recognized for that. And I think that's the beauty of the military service, is I can talk with a World War II veteran right now, and we all had our heads shaved, we all ate crappy food and got yelled at by some guy named Sergeant, we recognize that to this day, and we appreciate everything that people do. And then the last piece of that I continue to tell people is, one of the most important things when I was deployed was the people that were back home taking care of my family, and they were not military. So my neighbors, like you said, the deacon, the people at the grocery store that recognized my spouse while I was gone and made sure they were okay, allowed me to do the mission I needed to do while I was where I was. And I thank all the people that support the people who are in the service at any time, day or night. So thank you for all the people who recognize what we do.
So inspiring. Kimberly, yes.
Yes, and I wanted to say thank you as well as to all the veterans who have served. Myself, I never served in the military. I have family, but I want to say thank you, because you are away from family and friends. You're missing birthdays, holidays. So just to take that time, to that unselfish act to do that, I have to say thank you for that.
I think that's a great place for us to end. It's just a big thank you. And I want to say that if anybody is watching us that is a veteran or a family member of a veteran that knows that somebody needs assistance, all of these resources are here for you. Easterseals, the Talbert House, library resources. Let's not forget the VA. If you have questions, just ask. And if you're not comfortable asking, you can write an anonymous email. You can, do it by carrier pigeon, but the resources are available for you and your family members. So just ask. So thanks, everyone. Have a great evening and happy Veterans Day.